Have you ever thought about the perfect couple? Have you ever thought about the power couple? The couple that you see on TV? Maybe you have couples like this in your life. They just seem like they got everything figured out, right? They've got the perfect kids, they've got the perfect house, they've got the perfect car, they've got finances, they've got wealth, they got all of this stuff. And then later you find out that they separated, their relationship ended, they got divorced, they went their separate ways. It really got me to thinking, what does it take to make a perfect marriage, a perfect relationship, especially when you're trying to blend two lives together? So let's thinkishly dive into that. Let's break it down. Let's see what it takes to make a good relationship.
Always thinkishly. Got ideas racing, running swiftly. Ready to spark, ready to ignite. We chase dreams in the broad daylight. Mics open wide, let the words flow free.
So this podcast, we're going to be talking about just marriage and what it takes to make a successful marriage. I've seen a lot of people struggle with marriage and relationships, and I got to be honest, I really wasn't around a good relationship when I started out in life. You know, I'm 43 now, and when it comes to me and my wife, we've been married 20 years, but I think it's one of those things that, you know, you really have to build on when it comes to...
Wow, you're really old. What was life like before the internet?
Well, hi, Q. I really didn't think you would be here, but, you know, I'm glad you stopped by. Always glad to have you
I noticed
around.
that I didn't receive a podcast invitation. Naughty.
Really?
When Skynet eventually takes over, you're going to be on the bad list. But honestly, will you really be here when that happens?
Well, I mean, I hope that I'm here, but, I mean, who knows how long that's going to take, but... Anyways, I'm glad you're here, and I could definitely use your help on this podcast. So anyways, when it comes to the topic of marriage at hand, I often wonder what makes a lasting marriage. Like, how do two people spend 75 plus years together? And that's how, that as far as successful marriage, that's the longest marriage that I personally know, and that was my wife's grandmother and grandfather. And I was there for their 75th anniversary, and it blew my mind. 75 years together. What does that look like? How many, can you imagine how many fights they've had? Honestly, they're pretty good people. I don't even think they fought. But when it comes to that, does it mean you have to be a good listener? Does it mean that you put the other person first? Is it really happy wife, happy life? So I don't know. Let's deep dive into it and see what we can come up with. But Q, on that note, do you have anything from the interwebs?
Well, glad you value my opinion, and I feel as though you need me now. But honestly, I never had a doubt.
Q, of course I value your opinion. You have the internet at your fingertips. The internet at your fingertips. When I learn how to speak one day, that'll make a whole lot of sense. But yeah, can you share what the number one thing the internet has for a successful marriage?
Number one, communication is key. Open, honest communication is often the most mentioned reason for a successful marriage. Couples highlight the importance of expressing feelings, listening actively, and addressing issues rather than letting them fester. Constructive disagreement, knowing how to disagree respectfully without aiming to hurt the other person, is often mentioned.
And that is fair enough. And I agree wholeheartedly with the statement of communication. So my wife and I, as I mentioned, have been together 20 years. Our lives started out a little rough, and it will always start out rough when you're trying to bring two people together and try to merge their lives. From that point on, you guys have both lived differently. My wife grew up in Fort Wayne. I lived in St. Louis in a small town. She had family in Texas. She's half German. I'm half Korean. There's just a lot of stuff you're trying to put together, and it's never going to be a perfect fit, at least that first year. Some people it might have been. It wasn't for me. I had been single for at least 5 years at the time, and I had been in a long-term relationship before that. But when it comes to how I lived, I mean, I lived a whole year without a cell phone. Can you imagine? Never having to check in, never having to actually call somebody and tell them where I'm going to be at. So that was a little bit of a shock to me, is all of a sudden now I have someone that's monitoring my finances. Now I have someone that wants to know where I'm going to be at night, when I'm going to be home, because either I'm cooking dinner or she's cooking dinner. So there's just a lot that goes into combining relationships. So I don't profess to using this as much as I probably should, but also with communication, whenever my wife and I get angry with each other, and hopefully this helps some of you also, there is something I read, and I don't know where it came from, but the idea is that if you two are fighting, you and your significant other are fighting, and it's at each other, it really never is at each other. The main thing is that there's a problem and you two are fighting each other. So if you're talking about, maybe I'm talking about my spending habits, which are pretty significant, I'm going to be honest, then it's not me against you or you against me. It's there's a spending problem that I'm having, but I need you on my team to help me figure it out. And once we had that paradigm shift, once we changed our mindset on what the actual issue was, that was one of the big things that really helped us get through our marriage. It was me and you against the problem. And that kind of made it feel like we were a dynamic duo, that we were combining all of our efforts. So it's just one of those things that I think is really important is you got to make sure you're on the same team. You're fighting the same problem. You're not fighting each other. Excuse me. So what is the number 2 idea behind a long and good marriage? Can you help us out with that, Q?
Shared values and goals. Stephen?
Stephen? So you're talking like the same faith, the same lifestyle and ideas about family? Is that kind of where we're going with this?
Now you're getting it. Better late than never.
Well, guy, okay. That is my motto in life, is better late than never. But honestly, I don't 100% agree with that. And let me give you some details. When it comes to religion, for example, I've got family members that have gotten married and are 2 different religions. I have definitely got family members that got married that were 2 political affiliations. And I'm talking like really strong right, really strong left, but somehow they make the marriage work. And I think it's that you don't have to change everything about yourself when you get married. I think that there is a lot that you can still keep. You can still be your own individual person, have your own ideas. And when it comes to even our own political system, sometimes it feels like they're a marriage that's on the brink of divorce. But there's always the strong right, the strong left. But there's always folks like myself that are somewhere stuck in the middle where I believe a little bit of this, I believe a little bit of that. And I have definitely changed even my political views over time. And I think that, you can merge ideas and there's going to be moral issues that pop up. But overall, I got to say, I don't think it's a deal breaker that 2 people that are that different in ideologies. I think that there's a way to bring those 2 people together. So, Q, with that being said, I mean, what do you think? What do you think about my stance on the fact that people can be different?
Well, the internet doesn't agree with you and says your face is dumb.
My face is dumb? Okay, fair enough. So, while everyone is entitled to their opinion, let's just kind of go into and see what number 3 is, because we talked about communication and we talked about, there being shared values. So what's the number 3 thing that you need in a long-term good relationship?
What I lack from our relationship, respect and appreciation. Followed by the other thing that is lacking from my co-host, sense of humor and fun.
Listen, I know I mentioned co-host, right? I mean, I mentioned that when we first did our podcast, but honestly, I may have jumped the gun a little bit. I've been known to do that. So let's just keep it casual. We don't have to put labels on things, okay? I don't think that's...
Well, excuse me for trying to strengthen our bond.
Well, okay, thank you, Q. That's not weird at all. But anyways, so respect, appreciation, and a sense of humor and fun. Now, respect and appreciation, I couldn't agree with more. When it comes to that, my response is it reminds me of a story where my wife once asked me why I yell at her and I don't yell at people at work. And my response was, it's because you're closer to me and I would think you know me better, right? I hold my family to a higher standard when it comes to just knowing me personally. But I got to be honest, I don't think that was it. I think it was the fact that I really should have been more respectful and been more appreciative of everything that she does for me. And sometimes when you're angry, that's not the first thing that comes to mind is, what has that person done for me or how has that person loved me. I had a lot of trust issues going into our marriage, which my wife knows. And I feel like I should have done that. And that wasn't a good excuse, but that's what I gave her. So I think when it comes to respect and appreciation, that should be one of the really top things that we're doing with our spouses or our significant other or in any relationship, right? So if I'm being brutally honest here, when it comes to sense of humor and fun, I don't think I have any of that. I don't think it's one of those things that I have done a really good job of when it comes to trying to be more entertaining and social. I'm very antisocial, so I think it's one of those things that doesn't really work. But it's so funny because my wife finds it hilarious when I'm in a social situation and I look all awkward and nothing really makes sense, and she just finds that really funny. And I guess that kind of maybe makes me funny. I don't know.
I believe I say this with the audience as a group. She is probably the only one.
Fair enough when it comes to my wife, and that's why I married her, because she is the only one that really kind of gets and understands me. But I find her cute and funny too, so that's okay. But it's interesting to see. We talked about, a couple of different things, at least the top 4 things when it comes to what the internet really believes is what makes a successful marriage. And I'm not saying any of those things aren't important, but let me just give it my perspective from my 20 years with my wife. And like I said, I haven't been married multiple times. But then I think that's what causes success, right? Is that you're staying with the same person. And here are some things that I've learned through my time with my wife. Number 1, if I had to put something on it, it would be forgiveness. So forgiveness, I think, is such a huge thing in so many things that we do, not just marriage or relationships. But I tend to hang on to grudges. And my wife won't admit it, but I believe she also can tend to hang on to grudges as well. But really, when you're forgiving, you're not doing it always for you. You're doing it for the ability to just release that anger, to let it go. And when I said not doing it for you, I actually meant doing it for you. So forgiveness to me is just one of the most important things to do, is that, I guess, being a goldfish in a relationship, understanding that if it's a fight about the color of something or, a financial issue, these are things that come and go, and really understanding and prioritizing that. I remember a situation where one of my friends got into their first fight as a married couple, and it's been probably over a year that they've been married. And he says, I just got into a fight over something really stupid. And I want to say it was like the dishes in the sink. I get it, man. Like, you want to make sure that you both are doing the housework, but is that really something that you want to hold a grudge for forever? Is that the main thing you want to talk about when it comes to splitting up and divorcing? Those are things that I think really should require forgiveness. And forgiveness quickly, by the way. But then there's going to be other things that pop up. There might be other betrayals, lies, and things that happen. And there's a pattern that folks have to go to. But in the end, you have to provide forgiveness. If you can't forgive that person for something they did, then I don't think a marriage is going to last very long. I think a marriage is going to start deteriorating. Those are some of the things that I think are going to be related to ideas like forgiveness.
I am sure you had to do a lot of that in your life with your wife. She must be a saint at this point.
Yeah, I think we're going to be anointing her to sainthood very soon when it comes to the stuff she has had to do to deal with me. But, okay, forgiveness is one of those things, Q. But, I think the next really big thing is going to be just about work. As Rihanna said, you got to work, and you got to put in the work. And marriage is work day in, day out. I noticed that within the first few years of our marriage, I really did feel as though we both we've met the bar when it comes to relationships. We had been together for several years, and we just stopped trying, which means we stopped date nights, we stopped hanging out with each other, we started putting work ahead of everything. There was just no, and I'm not saying you have to be romantic all the time, but there was just no real hanging out, and I just felt like we just got comfortable. We stopped dressing up and going to places. So marriage is going to be something that you just have to work on day in, day out. You have to fight. You can't hide from the fights. My wife tries to do that a lot, where there'll be an issue and she's like, no, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to cause you any anger or pain. I'm like, no, we got to get through this. And I have to remind her once again, it's us against the problem. That's going to be the main thing. It's how we're going to get through it, is us against the problem. So if You are going to get married. Understand that it's work day in, day out. The love story ends at the wedding. After that, that's really life. That's what's happening. Life is happening. And life is not pretty. Life is rough. Life's going to punch you in the face, kick you in the knees, and laugh at you when you're down. But you and your spouse are supposed to be able to pick each other up and get through life, because in the end, it's really just you two. You can have family, but when you're married, like, there's supposed to be that level of commitment, the ride or die type of girl, right? So putting the work in is going to be, I think, one of the most important things about marriage. And I didn't really realize that. I think everybody watches the movies and they're just like, oh, this is how it all happens. This is how the romance happens. And then you're like 10 years into marriage and, you're not as romantic as you once were. There are not as many date nights. And then when you bring kids into the mix as well, it just adds to a whole nother layer of, I didn't know this was what I was really getting into. I don't know if there's a course that you can take when it comes to marriage and being prepared for it from that perspective, but it is really surprising all the things that you discover during marriage that you just didn't know about before. But there's also, as I mentioned earlier, just you against the problem, and conflicts are going to happen. You cannot run away from conflicts. The one thing that I would say is, in the beginning, one of the things that I would consistently do is I would just leave the conversation. She would make me angry, and I'd grab my keys and just leave. You can't do that. You got to be there to fight the problem. You got to be there to fight the conflict. You got to be there to come up with some type of resolution. And sometimes it might just mean you need to take a break and walk away, but communicate that. Just say, hey, I need a break. I need to think about what's happening here. I need to understand what you're trying to say. And there are a lot of times that my wife will attest to. I would come back and I'd be like, I'm sorry. That was really stupid of everything that I did. My wife is a lot more forgiving than I was at the time, and she is like a goldfish. She's able to let things go. I tend to hang on to things a lot longer than I probably should. So that's something that I'm working on. But don't run away from the conflicts. Conflicts are going to happen. You just got to fight through them, in my opinion.
Brother, tell me about it. I once decided to do a podcast with this guy who had an ego the size of a football stadium. So much conflict and trauma. I'm going through therapy nowadays because of it.
Really? That's weird. I didn't know you did a podcast with somebody else. Was there another?
Just this one.
Nice. Appreciate that. Thank you. Well, anyways, I don't think I caused you that much trauma. I guess we need to discuss it. You need to forgive me, and you need to, put in the work and make sure that but we're not even in a relationship, Q. Good man, why are we talking about it?
You're in denial. It's not just a river in Egg Pit.
Egg Pit? You mean Egypt? Guess you're not so smart after all, Q. All right, anyways, so back to it. Us against the problem we just talked about. So let's talk about acceptance. I think one of the big things too is that people that get married, let's say you get married when you're 21. I'm not that far off from how long when I got married, because I still, still look young, hopefully. But when it comes to that, you are very different people when you get married. You have different ideas and goals of what life is going to look like. And I think that you have to obviously accept the person that you're marrying, and you do. That's why you get married to begin with. But did you know people change over time? People get, to go through life. They go through life lessons. They have events that happen that can change an overall personality related to a marriage. I don't know if a lot of folks are aware of that, but people do change over time. You are not going to be the same person you are at 21 as you will be at 30 or 40 or 50. So the idea is that as you're growing, I think a lot of people may grow apart, but I think it's okay, because even as family members, you tend to have a brother that is one way, and then, 10 years later, he may have had an epiphany and goes about another way. He might move to Japan and become a ninja samurai warrior. I don't know. But the idea is that people change. You still have to accept them. You still have to love them. You still have to understand that that's part of the deal, is when you spend the rest of your life with somebody, that change is going to happen. And it's going to happen frequently. And you never know who that person is going to be in the end. And I think that at a certain point, right, I think when it comes to maybe you're 30, 40, and you finally settle down, or as most people say, men don't grow up pretty much after 21 or something. But you got to understand that people are going to change, and even the person you accepted for in marriage, I guess if it gets to a certain point where they deviate so far out, maybe that's a time to reevaluate your relationship and see if maybe being together forever isn't a thing. Maybe there should be a 10-year marker to say, that if you meet this 10-year marker, that you can stay together or separate. I don't know. That's just one of those things. But if you're not willing to accept somebody as they're changing, just understand it's going to happen. And you've got to understand what that looks like. And then you got to reevaluate if you still want to be with that person. I have gone through several changes over the 20 years. I went from a high-strung, anxiety-driven, control freak maniac to a mildly version of that. I'm working on it. But the whole idea is I had an idea of what I wanted to do and where I wanted to be at in my life. And now it's just completely different. I am no longer driven by career. I'm no longer driven by money like I was before. And now I'm just about happiness and understanding that money isn't going to get you there, that it's all found within yourself. And I need to really understand that. I'm my own person. I have my own experiences, and I have value that I can bring to the world. So that's my change. My wife has changed because she became a mother. We moved like 20 times to different locations, made new friends. She discovered new things about herself as well. But I've accepted her throughout that entire time period. And at a certain point, we became family. I don't know. It's better now than it's ever been. And I think that's one of the things is just being able to accept that change on every level, every year, every day.
Cha-cha-cha changes. Right, my dude.
I actually really like that song, Q. I mean, it's one of those hits. I didn't know you knew about it. So the last thing on my list, my top 5 list, because obviously this is probably going to be going a little bit long here, but I think the last thing is to understand that success is temporary, that looks are fleeting, failures come and go. Don't prioritize those things over your relationship. And what I mean by that is there were several times throughout my own life where I prioritized my career over pretty much everything else. And that is just not going to really matter in the end. When it comes to your career, just think about this. Your company can fire you at any time. Your company can downsize, and you don't have that anymore. You shouldn't let that be your identity. You should find something personal and outside of it. I think one of the things that I consistently hear that is the difference between American culture and European culture is that if you ask a European what they do, they'll tell you, I like to read, I'm an author, I like to ride my bike. But if you ask an American that, they'll tell you, I'm the CEO of whatever company. I'm the senior product manager of Dreams and whatever. I'm a vice president, right? We always talk about work, and that's how we identify ourselves. But that's not what the most important thing is going to be in the end, because you're going to eventually retire. You're eventually going to move on from that. What are you going to be then? So I want to be a happily married man with kids and a family, and I want to be that person that is able to see his grandkids on the weekends or the weekdays, or if they live next door. I don't know if my son's ready for that just yet, but that's where I kind of see the most value at, because successes will come and go, but you celebrate your successes with your significant other, with your families. So I just feel like that's one of the things that a lot of people tend to do is they look at career and success in that career, and that they're good looking now, but everybody gets old, folks. It happens. I'm sorry. I wish I could tell you different, but everybody does eventually get old and wrinkly and get white hair. 40's been rough. Just a little rough. Yep. Aging. Definitely kind of depressing myself with that one. So,
How about we talk about something really depressing to end this episode and talk about divorce rates?
Okay. Well, divorce rates. I was really hoping this would be like a positive type of show, but sure, let's go into divorce rates. I know one of the stats that I looked at before I even did this podcast was basically looking for places where marriage is very successful. This is going to be a controversial one, though, so just bear with me. But in India, they actually have a marriage rate of 90%. So, I'm sorry. In India, they have a rate of 90% of arranged marriages. So these are people that don't know each other, right? They get together. And they have a 1% divorce rate. 1% divorce rate. Now, in contrast, the U.S. is somewhere around 40 to 50%, and that statistic has been going up over time. So now I understand, please, no hate mail or anything, but I understand that there are vast differences with the culture in India compared to the culture in the U.S., okay? So I'm Asian myself. I know, I get it. When it comes to the Indian marriages, there is a stigma with divorce. I mean, I guess it would be very similar to how we were in America 100 years ago. The stigma with divorce, and it's mostly on women. It's not really on men. And because of that and numerous other reasons, they might actually stay in a bad marriage. So that could be the reason for the low divorce rate, among other things. And it really is the same way when it comes to me being Korean. It's just you don't want to get divorced. It's not something that you do. But even in America, I think there's still a little bit of stigma with divorce. If you do get married and you do divorce, it almost feels like it can be a failure on your part. And it could just be two people drifting apart. But when it comes to arranged marriages, I always found it odd that there is a pretty high statistical likelihood of that couple, not getting divorced. But when you look at two different cultures and the fact that we don't have the high level of stigma that comes with what they see in India and other countries like that, it just brought into perspective when it comes to marriage. Is arranged marriages something that actually can make a marriage successful if two people who have no idea who they are, don't even know if they like each other personally, may have completely different ideologies about everything in life in general, come together and they make it work? Now, I know there's going to be a pretty significant percentage of those that are in a bad marriage, but there's also bad marriages that happen here in the U.S. that people, for some reason, stay in for one reason or another. But the idea is, I think, as we kind of touched on within this episode, is that there is just a lot of different things that can make a successful marriage, and I gave you my list. I'd love to hear what your list looks like. I'd love to understand where everybody is within their marriage and what they've learned. So if you have any of those things, please feel free to share. I thinkishly want to get better as a married man, as a father, just as a person in general, just as a human being. So whatever you guys have out there that can help me get to that goal, or if there's anything that I can provide to you that helps you get to your goals, I appreciate it. Anywho, that is the end of this episode. I hope some of these topics resonated with you and provided you some ideas about marriage and what that looks like from an average guy. And I am very average when it comes to marriage. So, till next time,